Hi everyone, I'm Masayushi Somaya from Palo Alto Networks. I'm Chief Cybersecurity Strategist here in Japan. Today, what we would like to talk about is the current threat landscape and how organizations can improve their security operations overall. And for that, we have two guests. First, I would like to introduce Len Kleinman, CTO for Cortex Palo Alto Networks. Len, good to see you.
Thank you, Maz. I'm Len, Field CTO for Cortex. The way I describe it's probably the coolest technology capability in cybersecurity these days.
Fantastic. Devin Johnstone, he's our SOC analyst for Palo Alto Networks. So Devin, can you explain a little bit about your role here?
Devin Johnstone, I'm part of Palo Alto Networks' internal SOC team, and our focus in the SOC is protecting our own employees and infrastructure so that all of our customers can benefit from those services that we're offering.
Excellent. Okay, so first, what we'd like to talk about is the current threat landscape. So over the last 3 years during the pandemic, we were forced to work remotely, and then a lot of organizations moved their applications to the cloud, and then we saw lots of ransomware incidents happening all around the world, or maybe business email compromise. And here in Japan, we saw a lot of hospitals being targeted by the ransomware. So that was quite noteworthy. But from your perspective, how are you viewing the current threat landscape? Maybe from a APAC or NZ perspective.
Certainly. In a nutshell, it continues to evolve. You see a lot of creativity on the side of the threat actors, unfortunately. If I had to sort of sum it up, probably two things I think is quite prevalent these days. You mentioned ransomware. That is still obviously prominent, but I think what is interesting is some of the newer sort of evolutions or changes. For starters, I remember making a call back in about 21 and saying, I think that ransomware is going to evolve this way. And one of the ways it was, we're going to see more non-encryption ransomware coming up. And that certainly has come to bear. Look at the activities of Lapsus or Kerakirk and things like that. So non-encryption changes a bit of the dynamics. Now it's more about extortion, exfiltration, brand, reputation damage, things like that. So that I think is one of the interesting sort of twists that we've had here in the ransomware scene. The second one on the ransomware front is this whole thing, I refer to it as the Phoenix regime now. Because governments around the world have made a conscious effort in terms of developing a more robust legislative or regulatory regime, you're seeing these ransomware groups, Phoenix, that is, they retire or they die, and then they resurge again under a new brand, a new name or something like that. You saw it with Dark Matter, become Black Matter, who've become Black Cat and things like that. Right? And really, a lot of that, what's driving it is they're trying to avoid law enforcement and other type sanctions. So that's one area that's seeing quite a lot of volatility. The other one that I personally have noticed in the last sort of 6 to 12 months has been the growth in geopolitical risks as well as supply chain risks, and it's kind of coming together. And in that sense, when you look at that. A lot of those key drivers, around geopolitical type cyber operations has been about intelligence collection, intelligence around, say, diplomatic aspects, country investments, sanctions and things like that. And they used to be very state-based, but nowadays you're seeing they've caught the eye of cyber criminals. Simple example, these cyber criminals can use those geopolitical type launch pad and then attack supply chain entities. And in doing so, single compromise gives them the opportunity to scale and hit various larger numbers of end victims. Simple example, like in Australia, you get this interesting scenario with the mining companies. So they go after them. And one of the things we've seen with the evolution of mining is they have a lot of automation in there now. You have the large dump trucks and things like that. That's one facet. but you also see the strategical and tactical focus where they go after information associated with upcoming negotiations for the spot price on iron ore and things like that. So there's this duplicity there. So yeah, they're probably the two main areas I think are of interest.
Yeah, interesting. You raised a few points about, for example, diversity of the tactics in terms of the ransom payments. Yeah, I've seen different types of attacks happening. Maybe encrypting it and then take the data and then threaten to post the data.
The extortion side.
Yeah, they have like different ways to attack, and also you talked about legislation. Over the last few years, after the launch of GDPR in EU, there's been quite a bit of change happening around the world in terms of data privacy legislations. And on top of that, you talked about the supply chain attack. That is becoming really, really huge.
Oh, absolutely. I think about mid last year, it was interesting to see that around the world, I think the governments of US, Canada, UK, New Zealand, and Australia all made this broadcast notice with a very, very lengthy notification around the risk of supply chain attacks. Yeah, so they've definitely caught the eye of governments and regulatory authorities around there. As I said, we've seen a few of those in the last few years. Everything from SolarWinds, Kaseya. If you want to go back even older, CloudHopper. They obviously bear fruit. Going after that one target, then it opens the door for the threat actor to so many scale their operations.
Yeah, funny you say that, because one of the things that we've noticed, especially here in Japan, is all these overseas subsidiaries of Japanese companies have been quite badly targeted by ransomware and all that kind of stuff. Maybe because a lot of companies really have a bit of a difficulty in terms of like global governance, and making sure that they have a consistent security posture across the an enterprise. So that's one of the huge challenges that became really noticeable. But okay, so Devin, so how about the current threat landscape from a North America or a Palo Alto Networks perspective?
I'll expand on the supply chain topic, because before SolarWinds, we definitely did not hear supply chain attacks as frequently as we do now. That was a kind of a spark that caused the flame, if you will. And now we're looking at how do we do these risk assessments on vendors of vendors. We know how to secure our environment, but what about all of these other service providers that we're using? Obviously, Palo Alto Networks is a potential big target, as we have over 85,000 customers around the world. Somebody who wants to conduct a supply chain attack would look at us as a great opportunity. So there's a lot more focus on looking at how do we do those assessments to make sure not just we are safe, but all of the suppliers that are feeding into us are safe as well. We don't really have a technological solution for that. It is a lot of back and forth in determining what are our risks and ensuring that our needs are met by those suppliers. The other thing that we saw, especially during working from home, many organizations did not have a work from home culture before we all went home into quarantine. And so there was this rapid transition, both in people, process, and technology, to enable people to continue doing their jobs from wherever in the world they may be located. And now, as offices are reopening, employees are coming back to the office. Now we're looking at hybrid work as the new norm. So where we need to protect and what that attack surface is has rapidly changed and continues to evolve. At Palo Alto Networks, we didn't have to do a big lift and shift of technology. We had the ability to enable our employees to work from home. But what we saw was a mass transformation happen among customers who may not have thought that was something they needed to be considering. And at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a large amount of activity in trying to rapidly roll out technology to enable that. And rolling out secure technology quickly and urgently opens the door to a lot of risk. So we've been closely working with our partners, customers, advising them on how we've approached that internally.
Yeah, so the way we work changed quite dramatically over the last few years, and that really opened up to to the expansion of attack surface that you talked about. And we saw a lot of organizations move their applications to the cloud, but some of the access privileges may have been misconfigured. That would lead to a data breach, for example, or everybody moved back home to do some work, but then security measures were not really in place for a remote environment, so they had to procure a solution. In some cases, in the early days of the pandemic, they really struggled to procure because all the hardware is not available and all that kind of stuff. So things changed quite dramatically. And so in terms of the key challenges, well, we talked about attack surface, software supply chain. So can you expand a little bit on the software supply chain risk? And
it's interesting. Some of the things that Devin said and some of the things you bring up. If you kind of stand back and look at the big picture, it's not just attack surface; it's total surface exposure that has gone through the roof. So if you can picture whatever you use as an image for your organization's attack surface or the surface, and then on one end you've got hybrid work. So it's kind of pulled that surface out and now, as Devin said, it was remote work by exception back then, and now it's become remote work is the reality of just work. So that part is expanded. Then you've got supply chain exposures and engagements. So that's opened it, pulled the surface out that way, okay? Then you've got other third-party risks, things like software, hardware dependency risks. Right, so that's opened this attack surface that way. Then you got cloud adoption. So all of a sudden it's just gone. All of a sudden you got this massive exposures, if you want, and exposure management is really becoming a big problem for a lot of organizations. One of the points that Devin raised there, those third-party engagements, getting visibility into your third party's operational environment and then their subsidiaries, extremely challenging in that sense there. So I think that's a big part of it there. When you sit back and you look at that, it's not just your attack surface, but your whole exposure to surface is just grown enormously.
Yeah, supply chain risk management is not just about technologies. It's about the people, processes. Security practitioners have to, going in and look at all these different suppliers, their ecosystem, to make sure that their components and the way the environment they produce components were in a safe hands, for example. So it's a hard work. It really is.
There's a lot of moving parts to that now. I was just thinking as you said that, when it comes to organizations' ability to assess that, it's probably why we're seeing the significant increase around software bill of materials now, because that gives organization a bit of insight now into the componentry that you're going to be procuring from that third party. And the certifications that come with that, whether it's a FedRAMP or all the rest of it, again, go to a certain way of giving some level of confidence and accreditation that you're procuring something that's going to be of a reasonably robust level of security. So it's definitely impacting and rippling through the industry.
Yeah. So attack surface expansion is probably definitely the key thing that's happening. But at the same time, in the cybersecurity industry, we have a huge problem of a staff shortage or the skill shortage that's been around for many years, and I think it's getting a little bit worse here in Japan. We really, we have good security practitioners working in certain segments, but not, they're not everywhere. So a lot of organizations have to rely on their, SIs or, third-party engineers to be able to, maybe implement, support the environment. But how are you viewing the staff shortage problem globally, Devin?
The biggest change that we've seen looking at our own security operations center is we have started looking at titles for roles that didn't exist 5-10 years ago. I wasn't hearing much about security operations centers 10 years ago when I was first getting into this type of role. We weren't having dedicated SOAR engineers building automation within those SOC teams until about 5 years ago. So there is all of these new skill sets that are arising. And one way we've addressed that within Palo Alto Networks is not necessarily looking for people that have SOC on their resume. In smaller organizations, the folks who are responsible for security operations may be part of the network team. Depending on the needs of the organization, it may not be viable to formally build a SOC. So we've started looking at who are the other skilled practitioners who have a problem-solving mindset, who have demonstrated their interest to learn and maybe some skills in technology, who can then shift into a cyber role or a SOC role, or cross-train those individuals who are on the IT side of the house and may be responsible in some capacity for ensuring security. And we've also started looking at security not as an afterthought, but doing what we call a shift left to when we're actually building applications and building networks and systems and trying to secure at the code level before we ship things, wait for an incident to happen, and then go, oh, now we need to go back and reevaluate. We want to start looking at security as a necessity from the very beginning. And sometimes that means education for those developers who are building applications in the cloud, who may not have learned with security when they were up and coming in that type of role.
Yeah.
I was going to say, this is really interesting what Devin brought up, because I think there's some interesting opportunities that present themselves in terms of how we can tackle the talent problem. I know back in Australia, Defence started an interesting program where they started looking at people who are a little bit more on the spectrum, because they brought a unique mindset to detect and respond. They could see certain patterns and anomalies that you and I probably wouldn't, in that sense. And that program's turned out to be quite successful in that sense, you know. But it is an opportunity to be a little bit creative, especially when it comes to, say, people who are looking for mid-career change. And certainly our industry doesn't make it easier to, you know, for someone who's been, for argument's sake, say, an accountant all their life, or an engineer and something else, to pivot into cyber. And we probably need to look at, okay, what can we do from an education and training sector to be able to get these people who have life skills, but now we want to overlay some of the cybersecurity skills so that can, you know, we can tap that as a resource to help alleviate some of the demands in our industry here, there. The other part was security by design. It's interesting that people talk about it now. It was a fundamental component in the legislation of GDPR. You brought that up. It's not optional. It's mandatory. So we're starting to see, again, that regulatory environment starting to shift as nations start to shoehorn components, all of GDPR principles, into their updated privacy legislation. You're getting privacy by design becoming mandatory in there. And the last component that I find fascinating is in the last few months, I think I'm pretty certain it was NIST who released the privacy standards. We may well see privacy and security by design become mandatory. Yeah, that fusion of those two aspects there. So watch your space.
Yeah, I think things are changing in terms of legislations having a major impact on the way organizations are programming their software or securing the environment, securing the data they use. But you talked about the program to help the staff shortage challenges. But another way we could solve the issue of staff shortage is, for example, technologies like AI, machine learning, or automation and orchestrations. But they are all fairly new technologies in the cybersecurity market. So maybe not many enterprises have adopted them yet. But can you, Devin, as a SOC analyst for Palo Alto Networks, can you explain a little bit about what are the key benefits of all these AI-driven, SOAR-driven security operations from a Palo Alto Networks SOC perspective?
A favorite question I get asked a lot recently is AI or is SOAR ever going to fully replace the SOC? And I will candidly say no for now. But I see the shift in the SOC role as maybe being more training. Those models, we now have technology at Palo Alto Networks in our Cortex product line, which is looking at patterns, and it is self-teaching based on the activity that's going on in the organization that it's installed in. So the role of myself in the SOC may be shifting more to feeding that information to those models rather than trying to hire enough human analysts to just respond to the alerts that we've configured ourselves. We talk a lot about zero-day threats being one of the scariest things to be looking out for. It's the things that we've never seen before. It's the things that legacy technology is going to have a hard time identifying because it has no signature to detect it. And this is why we're at the point where we have to rely on some machine learning to help augment what we do, because the amount of data that we're looking at is continuing to scale rapidly, and it's going to continue to grow at that pace. We also know that threat actors are also using artificial intelligence. So when we think about fighting fire with fire, we want to be making sure that we've got a level playing field for the defensive side, as the offensive side is already there.
So true. So, Lem, maybe you can probably chip in terms of what are the key benefits of AI?
Simple. I think one word pretty much encapsulates a lot of what we are trying to achieve here, and it's efficiency. You want to get more efficient in the way you execute. You want to be able to get more efficient so that you can report with the right language to your board, to your risk committee, things like that. And when I'm talking about efficiency in context of AI and automation, the simple way to distill that scenario down is the adoption of AI and automation and implemented correctly allows you to standardize and scale, okay? Which means you can instill those consistent, repeatable steps for the functions that don't deviate too much. You've got to keep that in mind. And by doing that, you have a method to handle that crazy volume of alerts and all those other demands there. You also start to remove the vagaries of the human factor. So that's one of the challenges. Even the same person will find that it'll execute in a certain slightly different way, even though the same scenario presents itself. So automation allows you to standardize, scale, consistent, repeatable, and you get more efficient in that sense.
Yeah, efficiency. So, I think focusing on the outcome of the security operations is so important. And you could probably, talk about it because you are the guy who's, actually doing exactly that here at Palo Alto Networks SOC. So every time we talk about, the number of SOC analysts working for, our SOC team, a lot of people always get gobsmacked. So can you, explain a little bit about how our SOC teams, operating, and also how we are leveraging, all these technologies like AI and automation?
Certainly. So on the staffing side, our SOC team is 22 full-time employees today. And of those 22, 10 are the traditional analyst role, taking alerts that are coming out of all of the security technology and reactively responding to those, but also doing proactive threat hunting based on their own intelligence and experience. The other side of the house is the supporting roles, building the XOR automation, maintaining log health, and ensuring that those analysts are enabled in the work that they do on a daily basis. But for the size of Palo Alto Networks today, our technology serves over 85,000 customers around the world. We're responsible for something like 400,000 servers. For the size of our SOC team, that's a pretty small team. And when I speak to a lot of our customers and partners, they've usually got probably double the size of SOC team or security team that is responsible for protecting similar sized environment. So we've really demonstrated the return on investment for the automation and machine learning. We're a living example that you can do more with less analysts, but also it's made the job more interesting for us. I can certainly say from my experience, my role in the SOC got a lot more fun when I got to start playing with more tools, focus on building more automation, rather than just looking at that same alert every single day for a couple years, especially the maybe younger analysts who are just coming out of school who grew up with technology in their hands. They're quick learners, and you have to keep them interested and allow them the ability to build skills in more areas. And that goes back to the previous question about staffing and retention. If you've just got them looking at the same stuff every day and they're not learning anything new, they're going to start looking for something else to do that's going to challenge them a bit more. So the advancement of the technology is allowing us to dually retrain and reskill and upskill those of us who might have been in the SOC for a little bit longer.
Yeah,
Good
funny you
point.
mentioned about the analysts looking at all the same alerts and all that kind of stuff, because we had the issue of alert fatigue, for quite a long time in this industry, and I think the important thing is to change the way we think about security operations, rather than sticking to the conventional way of looking at all these alerts and determining whether they are high alerts or low alerts, or So I'm really glad to hear that that our SOC team's really fully leveraging AI automation and things like that, and obviously the Cortex platform is playing a vital role in keeping that all intact. So can you explain a little bit about how Cortex platform can help?
The way I like to sum up what Cortex brings to the table is we've undertaken this journey of convergence. So we've taken these distinct, separate technology capabilities, best of breed, and we've been able to then integrate them into the single platform so that from an operational perspective, you only have to worry about one console, one screen. With the power of all these different integrations, we've been able to achieve that. Now, from a customer and client perspective, because we've taken on that journey of convergence, it allows them to undertake the journey of consolidation. And consolidation can mean a whole range of things, but certainly what obviously comes to mind is they can start at looking at collapsing their technology stack. Because statistically, the average law of averages tells you that most enterprise can have anywhere up to 75 different security tools or technology deployed in the environment. And Devin mentioned ROI. When you start collapsing that, there's ROI there straight away from an efficiency perspective, but the organization starts to say, if I got 75 different tools of tech, and I only really need to get high efficacy, fast detection, with validation and corroboration in there, maybe I don't need 40 of these. So there's instant savings there from licensing. There's instant savings again from ongoing training costs, not to mention hosting infrastructure, all this flow and effects. These are the things that happen behind the scene because of our journey of convergence here. And that's kind of what we bring to the table. This platform that allows you to do so many wonderful things, whether it's aggregate, correlate, normalize source information for context, whether you look at automating your incident response, speeding up your execution and improving your statistics, mean time to detect, mean time to respond, those sort of things. But you've got the single platform that is like a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah. Best of breed platform is going to definitely solve all kinds of issues triggered by product silos. You probably talked about, the administrative overhead is going to be huge. Having to look at different consoles, having to manage different agents and all that kind of stuff, and also maybe the cost is going to be the same. Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but then going back to Devin, as a practitioner, fully leveraging all these, the advanced technologies like AI, automation. What would you like to say to, security practitioners working for, organizations trying to improve their security operations?
It's interesting you bring up the word consolidation. We've always been very open at Palo Alto Networks about what we are using to protect ourselves. Obviously, all of the pieces of our own platform, along with a couple third-party partners. But if you look at the history over the last 6 years of building out our SOC, this slide that has all of the technology on it has actually been having items removed. We've been combining feature sets. We've been reducing complexities, and obviously reduced complexity can turn into increased security posture. It makes our jobs a lot simpler when we're trying to manage the tools and detections. It almost looks unreal when you look at how few sensors that we have to have. And we were talking to a customer just the other day that said, my diagram doesn't look like that, but I would really love it to. And that's a common story that I hear. too many tools.
Yep.
The numbers, the double-digit numbers of sensors is just unnecessary today. We've got the living proof that it's possible to do more with less complexity, make it easier on the security team, which results in us being able to respond quicker and more effectively.
Excellent.
Yeah. Complexity is a good term. It is complexity is the killer of cybersecurity in that sense. The more we can simplify things, but use high fidelity, high efficacy tools, the better the outcome in the end. And really, I think for a lot of organizations, one of the things I like to espouse is this notion of iterative harm reduction. If you look at that for a mantra for an organization, it really boils down to through various iterations in your continuous improvement process, if you do reduce complexity, if you look at efficiency, take the steps, the necessary steps that improves your security. It doesn't matter so much how much it improves it, because it's iterative. Over time, you'll get a really good outcome. But take those steps to constantly improve your risk posture, and that's what I like to talk about in terms of iterative harm reduction. Protecting the applications, the organizations, through each iterative.
Yeah. So it's not gonna happen overnight. Changing everything
Correct.
From the current way of managing security operations to maybe fully AI driven, automation driven. So it's not going to happen overnight. So organizations have to take a step-by-step approach to improve their overall security posture. And at the same time, their environments are becoming more and more complex these days with hybrid workforce, IoT, a cloud, etc., and also supply chains as well. So in order to manage such a complex environment against the diversity of the cybersecurity challenges or the threats, it's probably the right time to maybe have a think about how can we change the way we manage cybersecurity overall, from product silos to a single best-of-breed platform, fully automated, AI-driven, so that we can change the way how security engineers, for example, operate in a SOC environments.
If you let the machines do what they're really good at, automation, do all the heavy lifting, then you can take those scarce, valuable human talent resources and go and unleash them on really high-level type stuff. And as Devin pointed out, that juices these people. They get to do cool and funky work. It's different, and then they want to stick around because they're constantly learning on the job. They can see a career pathway. But most importantly, I think that at the individual level, they can see that they're making a difference to the organization, and nothing beats that in the end.
The key word I like to bring up here is value. Where does the technology provide the most value, and where do we as the human analysts provide the most value?
Yes.
We're of the impression that the technology is really good at stuff that's seen before, the repetitive stuff, the high volume stuff. That's really where the technology is going to provide the best value. Where we as the human analysts provide the most value is the critical thinking, is thinking of the edge cases where we may not have a technology that's going to catch that right away. And we want to separate those to make sure we're using both resources in the best way.
That's exactly it. Let the technologies handle the things they're good at, and let the humans handle what they can only do. That's the way forward in terms of
Got to learn to play to our strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. And for that, I'm pretty sure that the AI automation, they're gonna definitely help improve cybersecurity posture and security operations, and also I believe that we have a great platform in Cortex to be able to help our customers.
Coolest platform out there, mate. That's it.
Absolutely, excellent. So with that, it's been really good, talking to you guys about security operations. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thanks
for having
us. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.